Good Lord, it's cold. When did it get so cold out? Oh, what's up, Mia? All right, I'm back. What's up, Mia? What's up, everybody who's joining me today? G-Man, what's happening? Any of y'all that aren't watching this live, please consider subscribing and turning on that notification bell because I'd hate to spam people on my page when I'm going live, and I hate spamming people on the Circle Fans page, especially since most of these videos are not going to be Circle related. But I know that people in the Circle Fans group do enjoy watching some of these videos later. So if you're watching this, you're in the Circle Fans group, or if you're watching this video after the fact, good Lord, that is shaky, shaky. If you're watching this later on and it's not live, please subscribe. And these are the fun things of going live. Consider subscribing, turning on those notifications, liking the video, of course, because that way you know exactly when I go live. You'll get the notification through your YouTube app. You'll get an email. If I could do more, I would. I'd send you like a text message or maybe come knocking on your cubicle at work and be like, hey, I'm live. Come check me out. So if you enjoy these videos, please consider that. With that being said, my video today sparked from just a thought in my head because a lot of this stuff is random. My brain kind of just catches something and goes with it. But I was thinking about with all the hype over Baby Yoda and people were complaining about the toy not being available for Christmas. And, it's a huge letdown. They missed the mark with Disney, missed a huge opportunity to make tons of money. There's a lot to weighing that. Do we risk a leak and then ruin the entire hype that surrounds this new thing by putting toys out before the holiday season? Or do we try to benefit off of, the millions of dollars that we'll get anyway and start producing these toys early and risk it being leaked, So Disney, I think, made the right choice. The holiday season, nobody's going to miss out on Baby Yoda because come May, when they release all these toys, they're going to get that money regardless. That hype is not going to go away, especially from now till May. We've got Star Wars coming out this weekend, and with the new Star Wars and the last Star Wars for this entire storyline being wrapped up this weekend, Baby Yoda is going on the Mandalorian. If you're not watching Disney Plus or if you don't have a subscription for it yet, Mandalorian is an amazing show. Even if you don't like Star Wars, it kind of takes its own way. There's a lot of throwbacks to the original trilogy and the Star Wars story, but it's not 100%. You have to know about it in order to enjoy it. So, but I'm sure you've seen memes and you've seen pictures of Baby Yoda from, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So all of that, it's out there, even if you're not a fan of Star Wars, and people are going crazy over it. Um, I don't know what the hot toy of the Christmas holiday season is, but I haven't seen one since the Tickle Me Elmo days. And from there, you had like the Nintendo Switch 2 years ago. That was the hot item. The Nintendo Switch Lite was released earlier this year. I don't think that's really a hot item for the holiday. The Nintendo Switch is kind of doing its own thing right now. There's no reason for it to be hyped up for the holiday. They, uh, they for the most part are just doing their own thing. They're making, their millions of dollars off of the Nintendo Switch, and it's mostly because of the ability for it to be a console that is a handheld. People spend tons of money on handhelds like Game Boys and Nintendo DSs and whatever the latest DS was, the DS. I don't even know if it's a DS. But either way, all these handhelds that came out, Sony gave it a chance, flopped a couple times, and you look currently, people are either spending tons of time sitting at home on their Xbox or PlayStation, gaming online, or they're playing their Nintendo Switch and they're taking it mobile. But to be honest, how many times have you been out in public and seen somebody with a Nintendo Switch in their hands? I'd say depending on your area, probably not that frequent, but also you may be in an area where there are like meetups and places that people go and they play the Nintendo Switch, and they organize get-togethers. So there's these basic points with all of the game systems. You can't really count that as a hot holiday toy. And a couple days ago, I saw a post. I don't know if anybody watching is into GI Joe, but it was the 34th anniversary of the USS Flag with a extra G in it, I believe. That was the aircraft carrier that was literally as big as your bedroom. I mean, it was massive. You were able to open it up and you could see inside of the ship. It was a landing carrier for the planes. I mean, it was just this massive aircraft carrier that a lot of people back in, the late 80s, I'm guessing if it was 34 years ago, it would have had to have been late 80s, mid 80s. People couldn't afford it. It was, $100, $150, somewhere around there. And that's 1980s money. So relative to today, you're looking at like a $300 almost, um, basically a ship that I don't even know if it came with any characters. So there's always that massively expensive holiday gift or the massively expensive toy that came out for a certain year. I remember one of the ones that I wanted was the Death Star. That was a massive toy that I surely wasn't buying. My parents, they weren't buying it. And it's become such a huge collectible that because of the scarcity of it, and nobody would want to get it because of the cost. Now we've got the Lego Death Star, and there's a lot of other Lego sets that are massive. If you saw Spider-Man Far From Home, um, his best friend was building it as he came in the window and basically dropped it on the floor because he realized that Peter was Spider-Man. So, spoiler alert if you didn't know Peter Parker was Spider-Man. I guess I should probably say that. But there's so many toys that growing up, doesn't matter if you're, a teenager now or if you're in your 40s, 50s, and 60s, there were toys that they were huge holiday hits. And I just don't know what the holiday toy for this year is. I mean, it's been kind of slow. There were the Hatchimals a couple years back. I mean, there were Furbies back when I was in middle school, high school. I don't even remember how long ago it was. So there's always those toys that are those huge holiday hits, and I'm not sure what you would count. I mean, my daughter's 19, so the holiday hit this year is either Cash Monies or stuff for her photography business or for her room, makeup, clothes, that kind of stuff. So it's not really a hot holiday item that I can really think of. But growing up, whoa, that lighting is terrible. Growing up, it was all about Ninja Turtles, GI Joes, and like My Pet Monster. And I think the one, if I could name one that I absolutely had to have, no matter what toy that I needed growing up, I'm fairly certain it was a game console, and that was Super Nintendo. That was like the big gift that I just could not wait for. And we went to Price Club and we picked it up. It came with Super Mario World, and I'm pretty sure it was one of the first consoles that had two controllers when you bought it. So right out of the box, you could play two players, a Mario game, and it was just incredible. Toys when they came out, for the most part, like the Ninja Turtles, GI Joe, Transformers, whenever those came out, I mean, we pretty much just bought them when they came out and played with them right away. But it wasn't until probably like around middle school when that started to slow down and those big holiday gifts, um, we'd have to wait until actually Christmas. But I mean, once game consoles kind of became the thing, Christmas just became what games are released for the holidays that we absolutely had to have. Lincoln Logs and Army Men. So Lincoln Logs weren't a huge holiday thing for me. I was born 81. But I definitely had those growing up because I just thought Lincoln Logs were awesome because they were like locking blocks. You go from playing with blocks and Legos that no matter how much you tried to build something without instructions, Legos never looked like anything. But of course, your parents are all happy to say, "Oh, it's a great car that you built. That boat looks really nice." No, it's the Ninja Turtles layer, Ma. Come on, you should know this. Like, you can't really tell what Legos are unless you have instructions or you just have this insane ability to build something with Legos. Um, but I think all the Lego places, that's the only real need for those when I was younger was so that way I could get the minifigs. Because those minifigures, those were the awesome thing to add to your collection, you know? And they had all these themed sets like all the time. And the Lincoln Logs for me, you had the two length ones with the two notches. You had the three length ones for the longer walls, and you could build yourself like a Monopoly hotel out of Lincoln Logs, or you could build yourself a nice cabin with, it didn't have to be a square. They locked in place so that way you could kind of make your own shape. And Lincoln Logs were a lot of fun, but once you kind of built a couple cabins, it depends on who you were. They were that served its purpose. You kept building cabins, and just getting more and more Lincoln Logs to build more cabins. I never really got too creative with it, and as I got a little bit older, Legos turned into the erector sets and those real intricate pieces and wheels and stuff to make much bigger things like a Ferris wheel or you know a nice car. Then they had some of them that they had a motor that was kind of powered by a rubber band. But none of that stuff, like I said, is like the hot holiday item that you had to have. And I'm sure if you go back and look at, each year what that hot item is, because I'm sure out there on the internet it exists. That was probably a hot item for one year. Tamagotchis and all of the little pets that you had and the egg that you had to take care of, those little digital pets. I never really got into those because, the one that I had didn't take care of it, and then you kind of have to start over because it dies. And a lot of those things have been kind of relaunched just to kind of be like a retro toy for newest generation to experience. But I mean, overall, nowadays you're not going to get the same longevity out of a lot of these toys that were around back in the 80s and 90s, just because there just seems to be a boredom with a lot of the stuff that's out there now if it's not a video game. I know that my nieces and nephews, they play video games and they're online, and there's really the social aspect of video games now that wasn't there when I was younger. You had people that were kind of going through the same complaints and concerns about video games that our parents' generation, or at least my parents' generation, went through with TV. TV is rotting your brains, and who has enough time to sit in front of the TV all day? That's kind of like that generation wasn't really adept to what the next generation was going to have, and what was going to make up a huge part of that generation. And same thing goes from my parents' generation to my generation. Computers, computers weren't really a necessity for somebody in the home. When you had the Commodore 64 and the 128, people were throwing in their five and a quarter floppy disks, and they were playing video games, or to the ones that were actually using them for computing, making programs, development. A lot of people weren't doing that on cores. They were using, Apples, and a lot of computers that, nowadays you wouldn't even consider because the power was just so not there. Um, so programming's come a long way because of the fact that computers have really changed the way people do things. Computers run everything: ATMs, your the grocery store registers, POS systems for all businesses for the most part, and they're even moving past that to like iPads. So you go into a business and they've got this flat screen and they got a card reader and it's basically an iPad that you can take anywhere and you can charge people for whatever you're selling. So I mean, a lot of things that the previous generation looks at and says it's bad for your kids, don't let them spend too much time on it. They need more time outside. I don't want to be that person, but I have to be. The time I spent outside with my friends, there's no reason why I couldn't have spent it inside watching TV and you know discussing pop culture. And because nowadays most of the time that I have social interaction, it's about things that I enjoyed growing up in pop culture, like movies and video games and things on the internet. And now, since the internet has been so prevalent over the last, I guess, 20 years, the things that people discuss now are like older memes and programs that people used to use to download music for file sharing, and what programs people are using to make their day easier, whether it's at work or at home. um, Perfect example, my fiance got a Cricut machine, one of those little vinyl cutters, and the first thing it tells you is to plug in your laptop, download the software, and then everything's kind of contained in that software. Well, my vinyl cutter, my software was literally just the only way that it would communicate with my vinyl cutter. So I'd have to literally do everything in that application in order to manipulate the image. And if I wanted to get into Photoshop, I could kind of do everything there and then import it into the application I'm using. So now that little Cricut machine, you connect your iPad Bluetooth and you can design whatever you want and cut it without ever plugging a cable in. So, I mean, things from a prior generation evolve for the next generation to make life easier. And no matter how much people said you don't need to be on your cell phone all the time and you don't need a tablet because you don't need to be on a tablet all the time, all of these things that our parents' generations saying that are bad for you, unless you're, addicted to it and you never disconnect, there's really no reason why you can't take advantage of the tools that are being created for you to make your life easier. And I think that kind of goes with where toys are going as well, because you still have collectors, people that are buying toys so that way they can keep them in the box and save them for future generations, whether it's their kids or grandkids. And people are kind of ditching toys and moving to playing video games and social media to take up their time. So of course there's all these studies about social media addiction, and they're real. There are people that do have solid addictions to these things, but you can't just turn that off for your children and say this is no longer available to you. So feel free to go outside and play with your friends who aren't outside because they're on social media. They're on Instagram. They're playing on Xbox Live and they're on PSN playing, PlayStation. This stuff isn't going away. It's not going to change when they turn 18 and leave your house or later or earlier. So you need to at least understand that all of these toys that are available now, and you're hoping that your kid doesn't make the jump to video game consoles because they're wasting too much time indoors, you have to understand that this is their generation. This is what they choose to do with their free time. There's no benefit, with the exception of just helping their creativity. If they want to become a toy designer or a comic book creator or artist, these type of things are going to be available to them online as well. They don't have to sit and play with toys indoors with their friends. I mean, we used to have something we called couch co-op, when you would literally invite friends over, people that you could see next to you, sit on the couch, and you would play video games. There was multiplayer games like GoldenEye, games like Mario Kart. These were all couch co-op games that we considered social. Well, this new generation, Gen Z, people born after 2000, they don't do couch co-op. Just like Gen Y didn't do social media and, you know, staying indoors playing video games all day. So as of right now, you've got to understand that for this new generation, the 2000 and up, they're getting out of high school, they're going into college. They were born around social media and around online gaming. If you bought them toys early on, what age were they when they stopped playing with toys and moved on to video games? My daughter never really played video games unless I kind of invited her. And I always wondered if maybe she just didn't like video games or didn't have an interest, and what that would do for her social life when she got older, because that was my social life, playing online gaming. Well, she's got her own social life. And even though she's not connected through Xbox Live or PlayStation Network, they have social media, Instagram, Snapchat. So toys are still around for specific ages, age appropriate, help with learning, help with, developing their brains. But aside from people saying having social media, having online gaming is harming your I guess your ability to be social outside of the internet. I don't know. I don't know that there's anything wrong with that, because honestly, how many of us now are really that externally social that we've been preaching to our kids, or our parents preached to us, that we needed to go outside more? I played football with the neighborhood kids, and I rode my bike, and I hung out front on the electrical boxes in the neighborhood. Went walking down to the park, and you know played baseball, played all kind of outdoor activities, and then as a teenager, hung out doing teenager things. But how has that really affected who I am today as an adult in my future? Because personally, I don't feel that my future has been really affected by not being as social as my parents wanted me to be. I ended up getting a job working with computers, and I've created a successful career that has now turned into a management position. Now, I know all results are different, people's lives are and their stories are different, but think about where you are right now. If you're not happy with where you are, I get that. There are people that are happy with what they're doing now, that they're fulfilled every day when they go home. And other people, they have jobs that they really hate, and they're kind of just paying the bills until something better comes along. But in all honesty, how has playing with toys or being social with, or growing up with online gaming and social media really affected who you are today? And if you're still younger, you're in your teens and your 20s, where are you right now with it? Are you happy with social media as your outlet, your way to communicate? Because my generation, the 79 to 81 millennials or zennials, whatever you want to identify as, we really have no interest in all of the playing outside and going doing social activities. We can catch up with everybody we know online, every last one of them. We know exactly what they're doing. We know what they ate for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We know if they had kids, grandkids. There's so much information that they share online now that we don't even need all of that information in a social setting. We don't need to go and hang out every weekend in order to get updated with our friends. And that's why social media is huge for this latest generation now. It saves so much time so they can focus on making money, paying their bills, doing what they need to. All that stuff is online now. If you're not taking advantage of it, who's the one that's wrong? Tell me your thoughts. Beanie Babies were crazy, and if you had 300 of them, gee man, that's crazy. But it's only crazy to me because I never collected them. It's not crazy to you and all the other people that collect Beanie Babies, because they were worth a lot of money if you still have some of them. There's a bunch of them that if you liked, a specific release of Beanie Babies, they had, special editions, and they had limited runs. It's no different than people that collected stamps and, the I guess that's the Gen Y, Gen X. No, definitely not Gen X. Boomers, I guess. I struggled to say it, but whatever. Boomers. If you collected stamps, what's wrong with collecting stamps? People collected them. There were tons of special edition stamps out there for like the Queen of England and for presidents and for movie stars and even pop culture beanie babies. They're out there. There's no reason why collecting stamps should be looked at as it wasn't a valid hobby. People who built ships inside of bottles. Is there a reason why people nowadays can't do it? Because things change. Every generation has their toys, their hobbies, and their social outlet. And I just wanted to draw some attention to it, just get some feedback and some thoughts. Because the more I think about it, I don't really care that my daughter didn't grow up playing video games with me. It would have been fun to play more video games with my child, but at the same time, she's happy and she didn't suffer from it. She doesn't benefit from playing more video games than other kids. And then the people that live online, whether it's they are on social media all day or they're online gaming, I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be able to do that. It really blows my mind when I see somebody post they want to find more outdoor activities for their children because they are playing video games too much. Well, if they're playing video games and they have friends that they play with, whether it's from school or from another planet, from another country, what's wrong with that? Why is that the limitation you want to put on your children? And I'm not knocking the parents that want to just find more outdoor activities for them. Exercise is huge for children. That's why NFL does their play 60, 60 minutes of activity in order to keep them healthy. There's nothing wrong with that. Playing sports, absolutely, if they're interested. But not every child is the same. If there's something that you enjoyed as a kid, I guarantee you there's someone that hated it. And if there's something you enjoy now, I guarantee you there's someone now that hates it. That's just how the world works. You know, in every profession, in every job, there are people that enjoy doing it and there are people that hate it. And that's the reason why we have so many people that do the jobs that we don't want to do. Like, for example, just very simply, because I don't want to put down any professions, but in IT, I don't have the patience, the time, the focus to do development work or testing. Things like that take a specific type of patience, attention to detail, and I don't have that. But knowing that, I don't limit myself by just putting myself in that box and doing it and hating it. And someone else could probably do it better and probably appreciate it so much more than I could. And that's why all the positions that are out there in the world, there's one that probably fits you the best and you haven't found it yet. And it's no different than some of the hobbies and the things that you enjoyed as a kid, someone else not enjoying. So my kid could be doing a lot worse things than playing Xbox One. Amen. At least I know where he is and what he's doing. He hates going outside. There you go. If your kid hates going outside, why is it so important that you send them outside? Because society said they should be outside. So find something for them to do if they're not exercising enough or they don't have a social life. There are people that they go to school and they're criticized by kids in their class. You have kids that you worry if they're one day going to go in and they're going to bring a gun one day. You don't have to have these worries if you stop surrounding your kid with this negative energy of what they should be doing and actually invest some time and find out what they want to do. So, if I were you, I would spend more time just relating to your kid so that way they can talk to you instead of forcing them to do things that are outdated from your generation that their generation just doesn't subscribe to. They don't understand. Um, I just really take a lot of investment in that because as much as my parents gave me and provided for me and did for me growing up, it was an endless amount of love and, you know, items, things, tangible things that I could play with and have and use, a place to live as long as I needed it. I didn't want it. I didn't want just that. I wanted something else, and my parents didn't support that one thing. And now I've built a career from it. Imagine if your child wants to do something with their entire being that makes them happy, but you don't agree with it because it doesn't make enough money. It's not what your parents did and what you did. It's not something that you support because whatever reason, it's on the other side of the country. Imagine being that child and your parents telling you all of these things. How do you feel? I know personally from experience, it feels horrible. And when I went my own route to try and find a way into computers, I jumped into a credit card. I bought a computer based on just how much it cost. And I stalled myself from jumping into a career that I could have started a decade sooner. All because I just didn't have the support. My parents, their generation, you either go in the military, you go to college, or you go get a job. Those are my options when I was out of high school. So what do you think I chose? I got a job. A lot of people will go in the military because they want to serve this country, and I give them all the credit in the world. I'm so glad there are people out there that do want to serve this country. There are people that want to go to college because they want a degree, and they have had their heart set on it for the longest time, whether it was the day they picked up a math book or if they sat in front of a teacher and wanted to do just that. I give them all the credit in the world because the world needs a wide variety of people. Teachers are definitely one. Yeah, 15. I was 15 when I started working at a car wash, and I was making enough money to support, you know, paying for dumb stuff, lunch while I was at work, um, maybe some clothes. But I mean, my parents were already giving me clothes. They were already giving me a place to live. They already gave me game systems and TV. I had my own phone line. I had a pager. Like all the things for 1999, there was nothing I didn't have, maybe except for one of those brick phones from Saved by the Bell, the Zach Morris special, the massive brick phone. But I didn't need one. So there was no reason for them to give it to me. But at the same time, where are cell phones now? You can record YouTube live and you can communicate with the world just from your phone. You have a calculator in your pocket at all times that your teacher was so stressed about you learning calculus and, algebra 2 and geometry. For what I do, I don't need it. But for children out there that will need it, it's a good thing that it is in schools. Having to pay for school lunch, my paper, my own phone line, car insurance, my own gas, then had to pay for my Nextel. That's what I mean. Some parents weren't as giving, and I was more fortunate than a lot of kids out there. But it's not because I went outside and played with my friends. It's not because I didn't play online with my friends and I didn't sit online on social media that didn't exist. So why is it that you should limit your children what they have in the world it is today? Now, one, I'll play devil's advocate. Online is a scary place if you don't know how to navigate it. Not just clicking on things and downloading a virus, but also the people that are on the other end of that internet line. There are a lot of people that want to steal your information. They want to find your location. There's human trafficking. There's a lot of stuff going on right now, and I understand the paranoia. So the one thing that I did, because my daughter's generation was brought up with social media and with the internet, is monitor everything that she did that I could possibly monitor. There's nothing wrong with monitoring your children. It's your responsibility as a parent. So if you don't want to keep them inside and keep them online playing video games and looking at their search history and their visited sites, then you need to get off of your butt and you need to get every app downloaded that you possibly can and get your children's social media logins so that way you Know every last thing that your child is posting, reading, saying, commenting, the whole nine. Because if you don't, you have nobody to blame but yourself. That's kind of the whole point behind being a parent in 2019, almost 2020. You need to know what your child is seeing and doing and what apps they're using, how they're communicating with other people, whether it's through text messaging apps, Snapchat. It's your job. And if you don't know what's going on in your child's life and you just want to say they're online with their friends and, I'm sure that they're fine, well, think again. You may be a part of that small percentage, but I'm telling you right now, if you have a cell phone with an internet connection and a camera, your child is going to experiment with everything that that phone can do if you're not monitoring it. There's no way around it. That's just life. So if you're not paying attention, you can't blame anyone but yourself. You surely can't blame the kids. You have to be the example. You have to teach them, explain to them the consequences. And as it is right now, the consequence is take their phone away, take their iPad away. You can't cut off their data because it has to be data enabled, but you can monitor it and you can turn off their Wi-Fi at home. You got to have checks and balances in order to be successful as a parent. Otherwise, when they get older, what are they going to know about the real world? The real world now is significantly tougher than it was when I got out into the real world, mostly because everything is out there for everyone to see. Employers can see your social media since it's going to be public. You want followers, but you don't know who's following. So there's so many things that we didn't have to think about. My parents didn't have to think about that our children need to know about in order for them to be able to get a job, to be able to, hold a security clearance. There's so much involved in that. And I really do think it all stems all the way back to thinking about when they were younger. Did you force them to stay inside to play with toys? Did you limit their online activity? And are you even monitoring what they're doing online? Because for me, I was happy to go to school and take my Ninja Turtles and at lunchtime play with my friends and we would, battle Ninja Turtles, and that was basically the extent of it. But that world doesn't exist anymore. And thinking about if you took Barbies to school or if your friends came over after school and played Barbies or, played with your dollhouse that your dad built or whatever that toy was, that world does not really exist anymore. There are probably kids out there that still do it, sure. But there's also people walking around collecting Pokemon at their local gyms that are landmarks on Google. Not something that I do. But if your kid's doing it, join them. Make it something fun that you both can do, or all three of you, or however many in your family. But that's why I think the hottest holiday toy of the season doesn't really exist so much anymore. Because since the days of Tickle Me Elmo and Hatchimals and whatever the toys are that have been coming out over the last 10 years, they're really kind of targeting a different audience than before that. Because people are online gaming, people are on social media. So if it doesn't really tie into those two things, toy makers are really focused on jumping onto pop culture. So hopefully I didn't steer the conversation too far away from the toys that you grew up with, the hot holiday toys that you had to have when you were younger. Um, but for me, it definitely was some kind of a Ninja Turtle or Transformer. And it quickly turned into video games after the Super Nintendo. But I mean, that's kind of what it was for Christmas. We had to pick video games that we wanted, and we didn't know anything about holiday releases. We wanted the game when it came out, and that was our Christmas present, like after September. School started back, you thought about what Christmas presents you wanted. You get the Toys R Us catalog and circle off all the things you wanted. I'm pretty sure one year, whether it was grade school or middle school, I wanted a bike, and I got that bike. But then things came out that were more expensive, like a little mini go kart or a scooter or something. And they were too expensive, so I didn't get them. But I think the last time I even remember going outside and playing was probably before, well, in high school we would meet up for like football and stuff. But after that, I had my own social gathering and, my outside social activities that I got into with friends. But it was just easier to be able to meet up at these specific places because we didn't have social media. We didn't have, the internet to kind of organize things. That's why the first thing when the internet really took off was the AOL chat rooms. You could talk to people that were in your area and you could kind of like have um, interests that other people had similar interests of. So I'm just curious what the hottest toys are this year and what they've been recently, because I don't think they actually exist anymore. Going through the comments, I don't really see anybody commenting about their had to have toys aside from Beanie Babies and Lincoln Logs, but I really do firmly believe that if you are looking at all of the hot toys over the last decade, and I think I'm going to go back and see what they were. None of them are really catering to teenagers and up, maybe even middle schoolers and up. Um, for a while there were board games that were, brand new and had to have. And even board games kind of turned into card games like Cards Against Humanity and Bad People. And, there's What's the Meme or something. Younger boys are about Power Rangers and Avengers. See, then that's great because the Avengers, that's an amazing movie that right now my generation is reaping the benefits of all the years of comic books, of these amazing artists and visionaries of these storylines, and it's finally on the big screen that my generation has just been waiting for. And now that technology has gotten to a point now where they can de-age people, where if they're in their like 50s and 60s, they're bringing them to their 20s and 30s so they can kind of do flashbacks. They don't have to bring in actors that look nothing like the actor that is playing the main role. And they're telling all of these stories because the technology's there and the world's changed to the point where it's about streaming movies. It's about everything has to be online. That's why your movies on your DVR box or on your cable box don't look as good as the streaming services like Amazon Prime, like Netflix, all of these CBS Now, and all of your channels that are now apps on your Fire Sticks or on your Apple TVs, your Roku box. When you're streaming in 4K, you're getting a such better picture, such better sound quality than you would out of your cable box. So all of these stories now are going to the theaters, and then you're getting them in your home a few months later. I mean, it's pretty much the entire world around you changes every 10 to 20 years. That's why people get trapped in what they listen to. There was an article I read that said after your late 20s, you stop listening to new music and enjoying it, um, because music changes every 10 years. You know, going from the 60s to the 70s, looking at that change in music, and from the 70s to the 80s, you either love or hate the 80s. You don't just kind of like the 80s or kind of dislike the 80s. The 80s was a time that you either loved it or you hated it. So people will either be driven crazy by the music, or the second that song comes on from the 80s, you just get up and dance. Um, and the 90s kind of extended into that. The 90s had a lot of boy bands and pop music. 2000s country kind of took a change towards pop. So just looking at music and movies, they all are relative to the fact that every generation, the world changes to a point where you either adapt to it or you get left behind. And going back to toys, it's really hard to shop for people when when it's a child, because Are they playing on their iPads and you get them an iTunes or an App Store gift card? Um, are you really going to go out there and try and find a toy that you think they would like? Probably not. I would not know what to get a child as a toy right now. If I were to walk into, um, well, Toys R Us closed. I don't even know what toy store there is anymore. But what toy do you buy a child? Sure, Power Rangers and Avengers. That works for your children because you know what they like. They're your children. I didn't even know there were Avengers toys. Well, all the toys now that make noises. I mean, you gotta think back in the 70s and 80s, anything with moving parts, if it made noises, that was kind of cool. Then in the 90s and 2000s, you would tell your friends, don't you dare buy my child something that makes noises. So it's kind of like we grew up with it and it got to a point where it was so annoying. And you, as a parent, your child loves these things with flashing lights and makes these noises. But like my coworker, he has this uh, trigger in his head when he hears a specific noise at work. It takes him back to this toy like cash register that he had because it's like it made so much noise, and his daughter now has one that makes a similar noise, and that's all I can think about. So it definitely has to have some kind of electronic to it. Like I was asked the other day if they make a watch that has a phone capability but no other capabilities whatsoever, and the answer is yes and no. Apple Watch and the Galaxy Wear, they are extensions of your phone, and you can now use them independently as a phone. But do you really want to give your child a phone on the wrist instead of just giving them a cell phone? I don't know the answer to that. This generation might live on their watches. Right now, it's just an extension of our cell phones. And honestly, I can't say whether or not saying to someone doesn't make any sense to give your child a watch that's its own phone. Excuse me. When in 10 years, maybe, Inspector Gadget, Dick Tracy, and all of those cartoons and what's it called? You don't have to use your hands. There was the I want to say it was Gunsmoke in Back to the Future. He picks up the guns and he's shooting at the screen and he gets 100% accuracy. And the kids are like, "Oh, that's a baby's toy. You got to use your hands." Well, that day hadn't really come yet. We've got VR goggles and you've got to have a controller. So we're kind of getting to that point where you don't use your hands for anything. But at the same time, it's kind of like way back when computers were first invented, you had to have some kind of input device, and that was the mouse. When the mouse was invented, that was huge because you actually could select things much quicker than using like your arrow keys and tabbing. And so there hasn't been something to replace just using your hands yet. And that kind of takes you all the way back to the beginning of time where, they used their hands and they started using tools to make things like fire and create things like the wheel. So your hands have been an essential tool all of your life and all of, history. So maybe you're always going to have to use your hands as the input device for everything, including virtual reality, augmented reality, and, the toys of the future. But I'd have to say that video game consoles and the internet, that's kind of my generation's big thing, and that's kind of why that mid area between 70 late 70s early 80s identifies as their own generation because we really did exist before the internet, and we now reap the benefits of the internet and social media to where anyone born mid 90s, they had cell phones when they were, middle school, and they have the internet and they've always been exposed to it. So I don't know. Those are just my thoughts for today. I know a lot of these really take a turn when we start talking because the conversation really does have to do with more than just that specific thought and topic. But let me know what you think. Like I said, if you're watching this after the fact, you're not watching it live, let me know down in the comments what your toy growing up was, the had to have toy. What do you think about toys moving forward in the future? Do you keep your children inside, or do you make sure that they go outside because they should have a social life outside of the internet? I want to know all of these things because it's interesting to me where toys and social interaction and playing outside are going to be in the next 10 and 20 years. Maybe you look back at this video and you'll say, you know what, Carlos was right. He was on to something. Maybe YouTube won't exist in 10, 20 years. Who knows? But for me, I think it's important to just find a common ground with your children. If it's toys, play toys with them. If it's the internet, make sure you're monitoring what they're doing online. Be active online with them. If it's social media, don't be too close with the social media with them, but make sure you're monitoring how they use social media. You know, they don't want to be smothered on their social media by commenting and reacting to everything that they post and do. But at the same time, just be present. And then whatever the future holds as far as what, the next generation is going to be doing for their social interaction and for their toys of the future. I'm interested in what people think. Comment down below. Let me know. And again, like this video if you like it. I'm always trying to create new topics and content that you'll watch, things that you want to talk about. Leave that down in the description as well, in the comments, because I want to be sure that if there's something you want to discuss, let's discuss it. Let's talk about it. So thank you all so much for hanging with me for another ride along. We're on 11 now. That's great. Appreciate everybody that hangs out with me live and everybody that watches this after the fact. Like the video, like the video, like the video. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. And of course, if you want to know when I go live, hit that notification bell, because then you'll get notified. Your YouTube app, your email. Short of me calling y'all and saying, hey, I'm live and posting on my wall all the time, I want to make sure that you guys aren't missing out. But thank y'all for hanging with me. I'll definitely see y'all in the next one.